It's my video review project for my Young Adult Lit at Cal Baptist University for summer session 2011. And for my video review, I chose to do my annotations, verbal annotations, on 5 science fiction books. And I chose science fiction because it's a genre that interested me as a young adult, and I really was interested in it because it combined everything that I thought was cool about science and everything that humanity has been able to learn through scientific study, and it pits it against just really fantastic literary elements, and it combines them and it makes a really unique story with a great cosmic plot, but at the same time real gritty scientific fact. And it also makes a great statement about humanity typically, and I, being the young pessimist rebel I was, thought that that was really a unique way to express one's thought. And so I'm going to start my review now with Ender's Game by Orson Scott Card. And I read this when I was in junior high, and it's about a young boy who's been genetically engineered as a child, and is then later picked up by a military school to be trained to fight against an alien race with which the Earth has been at war with for the past 100 years. And some strengths that I've gathered from this book from memory and researching it more is and it fits together science fiction and fantasy. And it does that in that it sticks to scientific elements in the plot as far as the plot goes, but the literary aspect of it is really fantastic. It's just like human race against an alien race, and it's just a really cool balance between the two. Also, Ender's character, he grows and learns about himself and learns about his capabilities, and that is something that I think makes any young adult lit book really good, is when the main character does that. Some weaknesses though are that his character is a little difficult to believe just because of his genetic mutations, and so he just kind of comes across as really advantaged and not very believable. And also that it's science fiction, and it kind of excludes readers, and that's going to be a weakness for all these books, is that it's genre specific and it's typically kind of nerdy. My next book I chose was Perelandra by C.S. Lewis, and I read this last year, and this is a great book. It's about a philologist who learns about the existence of creatures on different planets, and learns that Earth is a silent planet, and that it is cut off from the rest of the universe because of what is inevitably called sin. And so it's a great Christian allegory for one. And another thing is that it really presents a really accurate idea of the Christian concept of spiritual warfare. And another strength is that it's beautifully written. But some weaknesses with it are that it strays from typical science fiction, and that it's really fantastic, and the physics just kind of aren't there, and so it's more science fantasy than science fiction, and it's not very it's not too worried about believability, but really it's just a great read, I think, still in the long run. And the next book I chose is Planet of the Apes by Pierre Boulet. And some strengths of this book are that it's a classic science fiction story. If you haven't read the book, but you've seen the movie, you get the idea that it's just this this switch, and humans are feral and apes are civilized. And so it's really kind of a classic science fiction type story, and it's kind of reminiscent of the Twilight Zone or something like that. And another pro is that it's beautifully articulated. It's a really pretty eloquent book, but it's also a weakness because it's reads really a matter of fact. It makes it a little droning and a little boring, and that's also because it's translated from French, and so it's really kind of more worried about accuracy of the translation than like incorporating English poetics to replace what's there in the French. And it's also just really cheesy and kind of corny. And it's not very believable that you could go halfway across the Milky Way galaxy and end up on a planet where you have apes and humans, but oop, they're just switched. So it's a young adult reader would read this and say, really? They go halfway across the universe and that's all? Like, or halfway across the galaxy and that's all? So I think that's kind of a weakness, is I don't think it would really draw in too many young adults unless they had a real interest in science fiction or had seen the movie and thought it was really cool. The next book I chose was Ray Bradbury's The Illustrated Man. And this is a great book because it's a collection of short stories, but it also has an overarching story about a tattooed man. And the narrator meets the tattooed man on just a walking journey one day. And so some strengths with this book are that you can pick it up and put it down because it's a collection of short stories, and that Ray Bradbury's writing is beautiful. He writes like a poet, but in the form of prose, and he tells a story with it all at the same time. And so his word choice in particular is something that just stands out to me. The way he describes things, it's like he gives you 360 degrees to look at one particular really simple object in the story, but he does it so quickly and so precisely with his language. And some weaknesses of the story, though, are that it's really bizarre and that it may exclude some readers because of how bizarre it is and how bizarre some of the stories are. And some readers may just not like a lot of the stories and maybe only a few other ones just because they are kind of corny. A lot of them are really, really fantastic and just bizarre. And the last book I chose was The Gladiator by Harry Turtledove. And this is an okay book for young adult readers, and I say it's okay because it's really biased. It really focuses on the pros of capitalism and the cons of communism. And now I don't agree with communism in the least, but but it still doesn't give a fair evaluation of either form of government. But one of the strengths of this book is that it's a really cool story, and it's a subgenre of science fiction known as alternate history, where the author goes back to, for this story, the Cold War, and changes it so that the Soviet Union wins. And so now the entire world is communist, and then it takes place in the future, so it's in the year 2077, and there's an alternate timeline of humanity in which capitalism won the Cold War, and so now they're crossing over into the communist world timeline and introducing capitalism. And so it's a really cool idea for a story, but it's not very well written, for one. It's a little cheesy, kind of hard to believe, and I'm not sure many young adult readers would really find all the political jargon in it very interesting. So that concludes my video review.